Hey everybody, this is Brenden with Common Motor. It's common-motor.com on the internet, and today we're going to show you how to do the rebuild on the 175 series carburetors. This applies to the CB175, CL175, SL175, CB200, and CL200 series of bikes from Honda, built from the late 60s to the mid 70s. So stay tuned. If you are joining us for this video and you have not seen our carburetor disassembly video for the 175-200 series, make sure you check that one out first. We'll have a link up in the corner as well as down in the description so you can understand how this thing comes apart. In this video specifically, we're going to be doing the reassembly of the carb post-cleaning. So we went and got this cleaned up in the shop, and we're going to be putting one of our new Common Motor kits in it and getting it set up, ready to go on the bike. Quick note, we're doing a single carburetor. The bike has two carbs. They are symmetrical. The rebuild's on the same for both carbs. So just keep that in mind. The information applies to the opposite carb. We're going to talk about all the different pieces and components that come in our rebuild kit. It took us a long time to get this one configured correctly because there were a lot of errors and things that were out there and variances from Honda over the years. So we have one single kit that covers both the 175 carburetors and the 200 carburetors because they are almost identical, but some of the bits and pieces inside are slightly different. But our kits include the following: float, needle, and seat, and sealing washer. It includes a emulsifier tube, which is definitely a part that most kits don't carry. We also have the proper slide adjustment screw with the proper marking on it. We'll get into that in just a little bit. A variety of main jet sizes to jet all the bikes. Idle jet springs for the idle mixture screws are actually air bleed screws, and we have both types of air bleed screws, both the hollow type and solid type screw. Retaining clips, all the rubber float bowl gaskets, O-rings to seal the manifolds, top cap O-ring, two different slide needles for both the 175 and 200. They are labeled with the model number on the top of them. Take a look at that. And discharge nozzle, as well as a couple other like sealing washers and O-rings to make sure everything is complete. This is by far the most comprehensive and it is the most accurate carburetor rebuild kit for the 175s, 200s ever produced. I have my carburetor main body clean, as well as all the other parts and pieces that I'm going to reuse are clean. About to jump in and do the reassembly. However, before I do that, a note about cleaning carburetors. They can't be clean enough. They have to be clean enough to eat off of. Like every single passage and hole needs to be flushed out or have some wire run through it. A lot of times I hear people say, well, I rebuilt the carb set, I cleaned them, and I've opened them up and they're still dirty. So they have to be like spotlessly clean in order for them to operate properly. So again, if you think they're not clean enough, they're probably not clean enough. So keep going with them. But this one's ready to go. Let's jump in on the reassembly. We're going to start off with our carburetor body here. This happens to be the left side carburetor because it has the choke lever on it. And one thing we didn't do during the disassembly was take apart this choke mechanism because it really does not need to be taken apart as long as it's moving free. We're going to be good. It's best to leave that in place. I really don't recommend taking it apart. But we'll get that flipped over here. And the very first thing we're going to install is going to be the discharge nozzle, which is going to be down this main tube here for the emulsifier tube. So I'm going to put that down. I'm going to grab our discharge nozzle here, which is this little doodad. This is a part that a lot of people don't want to remove from the carburetor and don't want to change because you have to kind of tap on it a little bit. It has two sides to it. I got this flat side here where it's kind of blunt. That's the side that's going to be facing towards the discharge nozzle, towards the emulsifier tube, I should say. I have this tapered end that's here. This is the part that protrudes into the main venturi of the carburetor, and this is where the slide needle drops into. I highly recommend changing these out because this wears in conjunction with the slide needle wear, and oftentimes if you just put a new slide needle in and don't change out the discharge nozzle, you get weird mixture problems with the carburetor. I'm going to do a little bit of prep on this before I put it in. I'm going to put the carburetor aside real quick. Oftentimes when these come off the machine lathe, we have a sharp edge here on the body, and it can make it difficult to install it in the casting. So I'm just going to take a little bit of fine sandpaper here, and And I'm gonna just break that sharp edge just to make sure I don't have a burr or anything on it. It's brass, it doesn't take much, real light, but man, it makes all the difference in making it easy to install. So just a little bit of, just like that. Real fine sandpaper or some fine Scotch-Brite would do the same thing. So I'm just breaking that sharp edge. All right, on this one, I'm gonna put a little drop of oil on here. This is just some marble mystery oil right there on the end of that. And it's gonna go in with that open flared side is what's gonna go facing down into the carburetor body like this. And I'm just gonna use this is just a center punch, or a center punch, I should say, a punch that's kind of blunted on it. I'm just gonna press it in place. I might have to tap it slightly. Let's see here. I'm just gonna gently tap it, ever so very gentle. That's it, right there. I felt it seat. You notice how the end of it kind of is, it's pretty much flush. It might protrude just a hair, but it's visually in there, and I felt it seat with the punch, and that's it. You're not always gonna feel it, and you're not always gonna hear an audible click. Some people are always looking for that, and that's not the case. You just wanna make sure it's seated in there and looks at least flush. I'm coming next with my emulsifier tube here, a drop of oil on it. This is one of the parts that we have made because they are oftentimes really gooed up, and most carb kits don't have them. It only threads in a little bit, 7mm wrench on it, real lightly. That's it, not crazy tight, just feel it snug up, stop. And yes, you will have some threads exposed. Let's go ahead and do our idle jet, or the pilot jet. Get my fingers on it. We have our idle jet, or sometimes people call it a pilot jet. I call it the idle jet because it's, controls the idle speed mixture. We got a little drop of oil right on that. This is a number 35, which comes in this kit. And that just threads in right there. Just put it right in a piece of hair. All right, fill the seats. Just snug, not crazy tight. It's brass. The rebuild kit comes with a couple sizes of main jets. It comes with a 90, a 92, and a 95. Our original one that was in this carburetor, this happened to come off a CL175, is a 92. So the 92 is what's going to go in. This should be this one here. That's 92. So I'll put the other ones aside, but we'll keep them because you never know with jetting. You might have to make an adjustment or a change on your bike depending on how you have it set up with exhaust and intake. But we're just doing back stock on this one. A little drop of oil on there. Thread it into the emulsifier tube. And that's it. A lot of folks don't realize that the emulsifier tube and jet are two different pieces, because sometimes when you take the carbs apart, they come out as one piece. Just like that, just snug, not crazy tight. All right, I'm gonna flip the carb over here and we're gonna do the float needle. All right, let's put our new float needle seat in right here. Again, we always like to put a little drop of oil on all the stuff, make sure it goes together nice and smooth. I got a new sealing washer here, it's aluminum crush washer. Put that on there like that. Get this installed right here. That, I'm just gonna use the socket to get it started. 8mm socket on that. That's it, not crazy tight. All the stuff's small, and then here's our actual new float needle right there. I do know on the back side of this pointy side's a part that goes inside the seat, and that little pin on the back, that's for where the float touches, and it is actually spring-loaded pin. Just like that. It turns out our carburetor float is bad, and the reason I know that is I shave it by my ear, and I can hear liquid sloshing around in here from doing the parts cleaning. You guys can't hear that. I'm gonna shake it by the microphone that I'm wearing on my shirt right here. You can probably hear that on screen now. And also I'm getting some just weepage. It's got some parts all over it coming out of the float somewhere. So this is a bad float. We'll have to change it out. And new floats are something we have. We'll go grab one off the shelf and we're gonna put it in the carb. Since we found out our original float was bad, we're going to go ahead and put a new float in here, and it comes with a new pin, and we're going to check our float height. With it, our float height should be 21 millimeters. I wrote it up here so I can remember it. And so let's go ahead and just get that in place, and then we'll actually go to check the height here. And this should just go together real easy like that with my finger. If you're having to force it too hard, something's up. Like I'm pushing on that too hard, that tells me there's something up going on in this little tower here. I need to probably clean it up with a little bit of sandpaper. Hold on. Stand by. Okay, let's give this carburetor pin and needle another shot here on camera. Like that. Carburetor float in place right there. And so I had to take the end of the needle here and just sand it ever so slightly. It had a little sharp edge on it. And now it goes right through like that with my fingers. So I should be able to, ideally, take the needle and push it all the way through one way, or push it through the other way without too much force, and take it out, if need be, like this. You can just grab it real lightly and it comes out easy. So that's your goal. You want the needle to go in and slide in very easy like that. All right, we're gonna check the height of the float. And for y'all who've never done this before, we're going to be taking a reference from what is the top of this float here. This is a circle, right? So the highest part of the circle in reference to right here. This is where the gasket would go for the float bowl. And we're going to be measuring the height from here to here. We're not going to do it with the carburetor upside down. We're going to do it with the carburetor kind of like sideways like this, because we want to have the float touching that pin on the needle. But we don't want the float to be pushing down on that pin, because watch, see it's spring loaded. So we want to make sure we get that, it just touching. So kind of like this 45-degree angle is a good spot for it. And we'll be checking both floats, because sometimes they're twisted on the hanger here, and we want to make sure they're both at the same height. I'm going to show you a trick right now with setting the float height using the gauge here. Now, ideally, our float height is set from, I said, this gasket surface right here, but our float height gauge has difficulty getting down into that surface because it's kind of narrow on this carburetor like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to measure the depth from this edge to where it touches there, and it's about 3 millimeters difference in depth. So what I'm going to do is subtract 3 millimeters from my published float height of 21 and bring it down to 18. So I'm at 21 here on the gauge. Let's bring that down to 18, it's about there. And now I can take that measurement from being on the edge here versus trying to be inside where the gasket seals. All right, so I'm gonna find that spot where that float just touches there. It's about here, about 45-degree angle. And I'm gonna come in with that float gauge, and I'm going to make sure I'm not touching the actual floats, but I'm up there on the stem. Not stem, I should say the casting there, right across. And this float right here is like perfect already out of the box, but I can visually see from my angle that this float is a little bit high because it's not straight on the hanger. That one's a little bit proud, not much, a little bit proud. So I'm gonna take my carburetor here from my point of view, and I'm just going to bend the float just a little bit like that. So I'm just flexing it, not a whole lot of pressure. And the float height isn't very far off. Now if it was far off, we would have to remove the float, adjust this little tang here up and down, which will change the height. And there's lots of different content about that, but this one seems like it's already pretty close out of the box, but you always got to check it, because if you have to adjust it, you have to adjust it. And that looks a lot better. I'm just barely grazing the float with the float level gauge. So I think that should be pretty good on both left and right side. But you won't always be that lucky that it comes that way out of the box, oftentimes you'll have to bend that tang. And when you do that, take the float out, the pin out, make a bend of the tang, put it back in and see what you got. And that's how you adjust the height up and down. A quick another note about some of the carburetor floats is in the middle there we have this little blob of solder that's used to seal the float up, and we want to make sure that it's not standing a little bit proud, because sometimes they are when they come out of the factory, and they can cause they can end up, they're a little bit tight right in here, and they can touch the casting. So you want to make sure that the float isn't touching the casting. If you need to, you can kind of bend the floats out just a hair to clear, or you can do what I did here, which is to, I'm gonna take it out and show you. You can see how I just real gently, I just put it flat on the table here and just pushed it real gently with my finger and dimpled it in to get some extra clearance there. Float height is all good, so we'll put that float back in there. Should be back in business here. I'm just gonna blow into the fuel inlet just with my mouth and see if we can hear it leak or not. So as I open it up, I can feel it, flowing. Drop the float. Not gonna, I have no air coming through. That means no fuel's gonna come through. So that's a easy test. Did I get it right? Okay, I'm gonna get ready to put my bowl back on. We'll wrap up the bottom side of the carburetor, and then we'll work to the top. A couple notes on the float bowl. The bowl is really clean and spotless inside. When I said spotless, it needs to be spotless. This brass tube in the middle here is the overflow tube, basically, of the carburetor floods. It raises above the level and then comes into the middle there and then dumps out this little nozzle. You need to make sure that it is not clogged, right? And something else to go ahead and do on this one is to take a very sharp look to see if there's any micro cracks or any corrosion holes in this tube, or if it's loose here in the base of the casting. Because if this tube has holes in it or a crack or is loose, the carburetor is going to constantly leak, and you're going to be like, well, what's going on? The float's set right, it's a new float, the needle and seat is right, what's going on? If you're unsure about it, take some fine steel wool and you can polish it up and you'll see the cracks a little bit better. But I know this one's in good shape because we tested it, and that bowl is ready to go back on. I'll go ahead and put my float bowl gasket on. And that just goes on right in there, just kind of seats my float bowl. Drops on nice and square like that. And I had removed this wire clip. You don't have to remove it to get it on. So this little round, half round part faces towards the back of the carburetor. Put the clip in right there. On that side, put it on that side. Hold the bowl square, and and that's it. And what's nice about these is you can pop them off while it's on the bike and make a jet change or a side of the road float of adjustment if you need to do that. All right, let's put in our drain screw. All right, here's our drain plug screw. A few details on this. If you look very closely, you will notice that not only is there a hole in the middle, but there is a hole that goes through here. I'm gonna turn it 90 degrees. There's another hole here. This was designed so you don't even have to remove the drain plug to drain the gas. You just crack it loose and it'll dribble out of the bottom of the carburetor. But more often than not, these are just packed full of dirt and debris. We happen to clean this one out and make sure we can use it again. But they do tend to strip and get stuck in the carburetor, so if we need a new one, we do have them. And this is what we call the big head screw, because you can see how large the head is. And that big head screw uses the O-ring to seal it, and that comes in the kit, just like that. Put that on there, perfect. Some of the earlier carbs use a smaller head drain screw, and in that case, you would end up using this kind of aluminum crush washer here instead. So the early ones use the crush washer, the later ones use the O-ring. So it just depends on what version of the carb you have. So we cover all the bases there. And as usual, we'll drop oil on the threads, a little bit on the O-ring as well. We'll just thread it right into the carburetor body here. And it doesn't have to be crazy tight. Again, a lot of people want to over tighten this stuff on the carburetors, and you know, the carburetor body is just kind of like a zinc aluminum cast thing, and all these other parts are brass. We'll just come in there and we'll feel the seat. That's it. Done. So that bottom side of the carburetor is complete. Let's make our way to the top side here.